Hello and welcome to the EV Cafe Takeaway, a podcast focused on the zero emission future that we all hope for. And every week I'm joined by a member of the EV Cafe, and this week it's John Curtis. Welcome, John.
Hello everybody, are you well? We are, and we are really looking forward to today. And if I'm honest, have a little bit of a man crush on our guest today.
Well, let's get and see who this man is. Who this man that John has a man crush in. Well, normally we talk to innovators, pioneers and collaborators within the EV industry. And we have got the personification of EV today in EV King, Edmund King, the president of the AA. Welcome, Edmund.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm as ever delighted to talk to our friends on EV Cafe. But one thing, do you know what the V stands for in EV King?
I do, I think, but I wasn't brave enough to say. It's virulent.
Valerian. Very close.
Valerian. Valerian. See, I was right not to be brave.
I made a lot of money by betting people that they couldn't guess my middle name. That was the kind of guy I was. So I thank my mother for naming me after the Archbishop of Bombay, as it then was. He was Father Valerian, and that's who I'm named after. But valerian is also a herb that's very calming, that helps you if you're stressed. So, a bit like me, maybe.
Well, but that's why we love you, Edmund, because the voice of calm and reason that comes across. Not to mention a pretty good impression of Father Christmas.
oh, indeed.
So, is there a relationship with India?
Yeah,
to pick up on that.
My parents, after the war, my father was actually a pilot in the Navy, so the Air Fleet arm, and he ended up in India after the Second World War. I don't really know why, and he started working in India for Singer sewing machines, actually, and then he met my mother in Lancashire and got her to come out to India. And they actually got married in the then Bombay. And in fact, my two elder sisters, Ruth and Juliana, were both born in India. So it was really funny. A couple of years ago, Ruth's lad, Josh, who's a really good rugby player, and he was traveling around and he ended up in India. And there was like a top team. It was almost like a national team. And when they heard he could play rugby and his mother was born in India, he played some kind of international game, which I thought was fantastic. So yeah, we have a lot to thank my parents for, and you know, my middle name, she must have foreseen the advent of EVs and thought, if Edmund goes into automotive, baby Edmund, if he goes into automotive, being EV King. So my mother had great foresight.
Oh,
great foresight. And indeed, and so for those of you listening, in case you haven't gathered, this is going to be a raconteur, a tour of a raconteur, whatever. It's fabulous already, and it's super interesting. But so for those of you that don't know, and I mean, where have you been? But for those of you that don't know, Edmund King is the president of the AA. You will have seen him many, many times on your television set, telling you about the winter coming and the problems of smart motorways and other challenges that beset the motorist, and how the AA can help. And he's been doing that for over 15 years. So, Edmund, how did you end up at the AA, and talk about this role as the president of the AA?
Well, actually, Paul, it does go back a very long way, quite seriously. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, we actually lived in Norwich in Norfolk at that time, and our next door but one neighbour was Colin Chapman, who is, of course, the great legendary founder of Lotus Cars. And he lived in Cringleford outside Norwich until his big new mansion was built at Hethel. So we used to hang out with his kids, his son Clive and his daughters. So we were kind of friends with them. And quite seriously, it gave me such an early insight into cars. I was just fascinated seeing these Lotus Elans, Lotus Elites, and seeing these great Formula One drivers come to the Chapman's home. You know, I met people like Graham Hill, like Emerson Fittipaldi. Colin Chapman flew me in his private plane to my first ever Grand Prix. He flew me to Silverstone. I was like 9 years old. So I got that incredible interest in cars. They fascinated me, not just the Formula One cars, but also the road cars. And also, it did give me an insight into the media as well, because I actually remember when, tragically, one of the Formula One drivers died. There were a lot of what we now call paparazzi press on our road in Cringleford, and we were like out on our bikes hanging around, and you know, the guy from the Mirror and the Sun were going, "Hey, have you seen Mr. Chapman? Is he in the house down here?" You know, and these were the snappers, and even at that stage, I think me and my brother, you know, we said it will cost you £1 or something, and we got something out of it. But it also gave, quite seriously, it did give this insight into media and what's going on, and even at that young age, I've got to say, I was at the age of 9 or 10. I was fascinated with the media, particularly with the radio. I used to listen to the radio a lot, and there was a stage in my youth. I was actually quite ill for a while, and when I was about 9, and they couldn't work out what was wrong with me. I had these stomach pains, stomach cramps, whatever, and so I was off school for a bit, and my mother says that for some reason I used to sit under the kitchen table listening to the radio all day long. So if you ever, and I'd listen to music, I'd listen to interviews, and if you ever do a quiz from kind of, I don't know, 1968 to 70 music, I know all those songs because I listened to them. And one person I listened to back then who really was an influence in a way was the legendary broadcaster Jimmy Young. And I used to listen to the Jimmy Young show. And back then, Jimmy Young, way back then, used to interview people. So it wasn't just about playing music. He used to interview top politicians and whatever. And I was just fascinated by that. And even as a kid, it's quite funny. I used to, this sounds a bit sad, I used to kind of sit on the toilet and pretend I'm interviewing people, and I'd think up questions and all of that. And so, you know, some 40 years later, when I turn up in Broadcasting House to be interviewed by Jimmy Young, was the pinnacle of my career. I didn't tell Jimmy I used to sit on the toilet thinking about him and coming up with questions, but being interviewed by Jimmy, and he actually became quite a friend of mine from doing interviews. He'd phone me up and say, "Oh, Edmund, I'm getting older and I can't get car insurance. Can you help me out?" and stuff like this. And so it almost came full circle from just this spark of an idea when I was a kid, and then seeing it through, and then, you know, working with Jimmy Young, doing lots of interviews on what is now the Jeremy Vine show, which you know, I still talk to Jeremy Vine a lot, and he's a friend of mine as well. So that has continued. But yeah, that was my early insight into cars and the media. And you know, I'm just so lucky that those interests from a young age have become my career. You know, what could be better to talk about the stuff I love? And then in the mix, there's the politics that comes into it, and that was an influence for me. I studied politics at Newcastle University, and I absolutely loved it. I'm fascinated by politics, the psychology of politics, the history of politics, what makes people tick. And again, in my job, I use that politics. I'm hoping to get a call from a minister soon, and that's very important to me in my campaigning life. And how do you influence people? How do you get decisions changed? So no, I'm lucky. I do what I love.
Indeed, and that role with the AA, how did it come about? Because it's not as we would understand, like the CEO or the managing director or something like that. This is, it's a presidential role. How did that come about?
It was quite interesting, and I never thought I was going to be president of the AA. I was approached by the AA CEO at the time and their executive chairman some 15 years ago when I was working for another motoring organisation, interestingly. And I yes, we can't name them, but you probably know who they are. And
well, there we go.
And I had several meetings with them, and they talked about the AA, that they want to regenerate it, they want to build it up, they want to show progress, and that some of the shine of the badge had perhaps been lost in the previous years under different ownership, and they wanted to shine it up and go forward, and they wanted the AA to reassert itself as the true voice of the motorist, and they talked to me about that. So I just assumed through these discussions what they were talking about was, I don't know, Director of External Affairs or something like that, although they never actually stated what the job was. And then, after talking to them for a bit, I think I was at my mother's, and I got this call out of the blue from the CEO, and I answered it. And they said, "Oh, yes, Edmund, and we've thought about this. We really want you to join us, and we want you to be president." I almost went, "Oh, F off." I thought it was a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, winding me up. And I'm kind of going, "Oh, come on, president of the AA." And no, it was Andrew Strong, who was the chief executive, who, he's no longer at the AA, but I'm still great friends with him. And the way they saw it as kind of, a lot of the European motoring clubs do actually have a president who's like the figurehead of the club, who speaks on behalf of drivers. So they saw it along those lines. So yeah, it's a lofty title, but I do have a proper job within that. So I do head up all of the campaigning, the public affairs, the work with government, the external communications. And also in 2008, I set up the AA Charitable Trust for Road Safety and the Environment, which is a registered charity with trustees. And some of our campaigns on safety, like think bikes, distracted drivers, drowsy drivers, and more recently, Caitlin's Hour and Caitlin's Message, which is about young teenagers getting killed on rural roads. Those have all come under the Charitable Trust. So no, if someone said, "Write your perfect job description," and the job description was go out there, campaign on behalf of motorists, get in the media every day, influence government, well, I couldn't have written a better job description myself. So yeah, I've been very lucky, I think, in my career.
Fantastic.
Edmund, I remember meeting you for the very first time and very shyly asking if I could have a photograph with you. I never did ever.
I remember,
ever.
John,
we all do that, right?
I remember thinking that was a little bit weird because it was at Oldbury. I remember it quite well.
That's
and
right.
You came up to me and said, "Edmund, I've followed your stuff for a while. Would you mind having a photograph?" And
it was a massive moment. I never do that to anybody. It irritates the hell out of me.
Flattered.
And No. What staggered me about you is the common touch. Is that whilst you talk about Jimmy Young and you talk about incredible, I'm expecting a call from a minister, and most people I would think, oh, what an arse. You are just the most down to earth, genuine, decent human being. You said to me at the time, here's my card with my email address on it. If you need me, just call. And I was like, oh, please, behave yourself. That'll just go through to a PA. Yeah. And it doesn't. You are a genuinely decent human being. How do you keep that decency and that sort of groundedness?
No, I do think, John, quite seriously, this does go back to my childhood, because I am actually one of 9 children, and that, you know, but I think it's quite important, because growing up, when you've got 4 brothers and 4 sisters and you're kind of in the middle, you know, you've got to think about other people all of the time. You've got to help your parent, you know, I don't know, little things like, you know, washing up when you didn't have dishwashers and there's 11 of you in the household. You know, you would have a rota for washing up. So you had to do that. And you had to get on with people. You had to have a degree of confidence as well, because you had to speak louder than Stephen and Dominic and Francis and Conrad and Ruth and Juliana and Genevieve and Alice. And, you know, you had to get heard. And my parents were really down to earth people, you know, they you know, did great things in their life. My dad turned out to be a fantastic wine taster. My mother, a brilliant English teacher and drama. But they kept us all grounded, you know. And I think, to be honest, when I think back, I actually think that's helped me in my career. And that, you know, you've always... I can be hard with people. I can push a hard deal. I can push a hard bargain. And when I'm campaigning, you know, sometimes that side of me, some people think it is a bit stubborn, the way I continuously campaign. But on the other side, there's still that human touch and getting on with people and talking to people. And there is this whole kind of thing. You know, people are important to your life. That's what life's about. It's how you get on with people. So I think it is really, really important. And throughout my career, you know, I've made some enemies perhaps, but I've certainly made more friends than enemies.
And despite the fact that I'm a bit weird, what I...
You nearly made me spill my AAT.
Now then, I can't believe you don't have your own EV Cafe mug there, Edmund. This is disappointing.
Actually, I do, and my wife, Deirdre, said the other day, Edmund, why don't you use that cup? It's a really good cup. So she's supporting you, but I have got the AA branded one today. But I should have brought my EV Cafe one, but it is back there, yeah.
So who's your biggest influence in your life? Because clearly people matter greatly to you, but is there one individual who has helped to shape who you are?
Well, I think it is a couple. I mean, you know, my parents, obviously, the way we were brought up, and the importance of that as well, John. It's about not giving you arrogance, but giving you confidence, and that is something my parents did. So, you know, little things like every Christmas we went away for Christmas. There was a whole group of people, and over 5 days, my mother would produce a play in 3 or 4 days, and I would take part every time. So from a young age, I was kind of acting, being out there, and it helped develop that confidence. And you know, I certainly got that from my mother, and I think, you know, from my father as well. He was one of those people who he in some ways he was too kind. You know, if anything happened, he would stop. I remember instance in Norfolk, someone on a horse got hit on a humpback bridge. My dad would be the guy who'd stop, he'd get out the car, he'd get the blanket out the back of the car, he'd wrap up the person in the blanket, he would call the police, he would organise it, he would do it. He was one of those guys. He had to take control. And, you know, sometimes we'd take the mickey out of him. He loved France because he ended up in the wine trade. And you'd go with Dad to France and it'd be, je suis Monsieur Dominic King de Bouchard-Aynay, je veux, give me the worst franglais. And we would be going, Dad, because you speak loud doesn't mean they understand you in French. And, and my French was better than my dad's because I studied it at O-level and I spent a year living in France and all of that. So we had to put up with some of that. But yeah, my parents were great influences. But then it is funny how little things influence your life. I remember being in a pub in Chipping Norton. We lived in Chipping Norton, the White Hart pub. And I was doing my A-levels, so I can't remember if I was 18 by then. I could have been 17, underage drinking, bad thing. But, a pint of Hook Norton on a Friday night never did anyone any harm. And I was in this pub, and there was a new barman at the pub, and I just got talking to him, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm doing my A-levels, and I'm looking at university, but I really don't know." And he talked to me, and he said, "I know, Edmund, what you ought to do. You ought to do politics at Newcastle University. I've actually just done a PhD at Newcastle." And this was like out of the blue. And I can still picture this guy, Steve Barraclough, who I didn't know from Adam. He was the barman. And he told me to go to Newcastle University. And so I applied. And I remember when I went up there for an interview, I had an uncle who lived in Newcastle. I met him. I met this guy, Steve, the barman, who I didn't know. And so to me, though, guys, I find it quite odd how little things in life then influence you. Because I hadn't really thought about politics. I was going to study English literature or something. I love Jane Austen. I love reading. I love, and that was my passion. But from him talking to me, he said, no, you'd be really good at politics. And so, yeah. So, he was a great influence. And then I guess also it's other people I've worked with along the way have influenced me. I've worked with some really, 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 really good people who've been in my teams. And the whole thing that I like about campaigning, it's not just me. And I know sometimes I get the headlines and all of that, but I always work in a team. And it's the people who work with you that you can knock ideas off them. You can say, is this mad? What do you think? And that to me, to be perfectly honest, has always been so important working in those teams. And throughout my career, the people I've worked with, have become my friends. The best man at my wedding was someone I worked with 25 years ago, and, still kind of collaborate to today. So, yeah, there've been lots of influences, but it's difficult to say if it was just one. Jimmy Young was an influence. Colin Chapman was an influence because those shaped the way I've become. The funny thing, though, is I've never studied communications. I've never done a PR course. In my life, I kind of fell into it, and my first job actually before university kind of pushed me that way. And again, it's how luck helped me. I went to work in France for a year before going to Newcastle University, and through my dad, actually, I got a job working for a wine company in Burgundy, but it was meant to be working in the vineyards, working in the cellars, bottling wines, etc. And that's what I started doing. And then I just had this stroke of luck that they had a PR guy. It was actually a Welsh guy called Terry Price, and he was leaving Bouchard A&E, and Bouchard's really needed someone who spoke good English because they had a lot of buyers coming from America, Canada, etc. So the boss, Monsieur Paul Bouchard, came up to me and he said, "Edmund, would you like to be my PR? Would you like to?" I honestly did not know what PR was, but I thought it sounded better than manually bottling wines and labeling wines every day. So I said, "Paul, yes, I'd love to do it." And he said, "Well, there is one catch. We have to meet at 8:00 every morning for the next month, and you have to taste these wines." So for a month, at 8:00 every morning, I had 10 Burgundy white wines, 10 red wines, from a Aligoté to a Meursault Premier Cru, from a Beaujolais to a Chambertin Clos de Bez Premier Cru. And I had to taste those same 20 wines every day. And at the end, Paul Bouchard tested me, which one of those four is a Chablis, which one of the, and I passed the test. I became a wine taster. And incidentally, I made a lot of friends in Beaune, because at the end of the day, I put a cork in the Chambertin Clos de Bez, I put a cork in the Meursault, and you've only tasted that much. And I'd take them to my little apartment, and friends go, Ed, have you got any of those wines? Oh yes, come over. So great friends. But what that led to was me working with clients, picking them up at Dijon Airport. And even at that stage, I was only 18 or so, but I had this kind of flair for publicity. So I said to Paul Bouchard, look, why don't I bring out a London taxi and we can pick them up in a London taxi? So I had this old diesel London taxi that we drove over there. And on the front where it says for hire, it had drink Bouchard-Ainy wines. And then on the back where the seats fold down, we had a map of the Côte de Nuits, a map of the Côte de Beaune. So I'd drive through the vineyards and say, on your left, you can see Chateau Clos de Vosgeot. On your right. And then, the best part of the job was then taking these clients to one of Bouchard's recommended restaurants where they had Bouchard-Ainy wines, and eating and drinking some of the best wines that you would ever have. And then in the winter months when they didn't have clients, that's when Monsieur Paul Bouchard said, Edmund, now he's the PR. And I kind of went, yeah, but I've done all the visits. I didn't, no, you haven't got visitors. You've got to promote. You've got to promote our wines. And I still didn't really know what PR meant. So I went away and I thought about it. I thought, well, how do I promote wines? And I thought, I could write an article about some of these wines and try and get it in the Daily Telegraph. And lo and behold, I did. I had no training whatsoever. And of course, you didn't have the internet then or whatever. So you had to physically send the article to the Daily Telegraph. And I got this article in, and it was about a wine called a Royal Kier. And that's taking Crémant de Bourgogne, which is like champagne. It's a sparkling wine, much better than Prosecco. Don't drink Prosecco. Look for Crémant de Bourgogne. It's made in a champagne method. And then if you mix it with cassis, which is the kind of blackcurrant type aperitif, you get a Kier Royale. So it's sparkling wine with blackcurrant. So I wrote about this. I wrote a bit about the history of the Dukes of Burgundy and how this wine came about. And lo and behold, the Daily Telegraph published it, and Bouchard-Ainy all over it. So Paul Bouchard said, you are a very good PR. And I'm kind of going, oh, am I? So yeah, I fell into PR by mistake, and I didn't really know what PR was, but I seemed to be able to do it to some extent.
It's incredible the amount of people that we have spoken to. We've spoken to some great people here, and often because you hear two sides of a story, right? You hear people that have they've woken up one morning and they've decided this is what they're going to do and this is how they're going to do it, and they go out and they deliver on all of these things. They're planned to within an inch of their lives. But I have to be absolutely honest that I find those people, for me, quite alien, because I'm like, I just don't have that in me. I'm similar to yourself in that respect. And I think the kind of falling into the automotive sector is a sector that everybody falls into. Nobody wakes up any morning going, I want to sell cars. And even fewer people wake up one morning and go, I want to sell vans. That this is a thing, right? And we stumble through life, kind of falling into things.
Well, more than that, because I did have a kind of different period in between. So, after graduating, and I worked in the civil service for a while. I was a graduate trainee at the then Department of Employment. And, I learned a lot. I ran Hackney Job Centre. I was manager of Hackney Job Centre about the age of 22 when it was Britain's poorest borough. I worked at Brixton Dole office, Battersea Dole office, So I learned a lot about management, a lot about people, and I ended up at head office in Caxton House working on policy with ministers. But it was one of those days I had that light bulb moment. I kind of looked around me one day, and this is the honest truth. And I learned so much from the civil service and the training, and I don't begrudge it at all. But one day I looked around and I saw people that had been sitting there for 30 years. I thought, I don't want to be here in 30 years' time. There's more I want to do with life. I didn't know what, but I knew that there was more.
Yeah.
And I basically, I said, can I have a year off, rather than resigning full? And I just went off to seek fame and fortune in Hollywood. That was my dream. And I did.
Like literally Hollywood.
No, I did. I had a MGB that was quite a nice car. I sold my MGB. I got a few grand for that. And I went to Hollywood, and I knew one person in LA, and that was it. And I thought, well, how can I make money in Hollywood? So to start off with, I started my own business. I started an antique English jewelry business. I went with my mother to Bermondsey Market. I bought some Victorian brooches, necklaces, went out to LA. And on my first day in the land of the free, I knew one guy over there, Fred Riancho, an American-Mexican guy that I'd met in Nottingham. He knew one of my brothers, Stephen. Great guy, Fred. And he took me to his family's home in North Hollywood. And they were a very humble Mexican family. His father, great man, worked in downtown in the market there. But a friend of theirs had come over, and he was some Mexican guy, millionaire, had a bit of money. And Fred said, Ed's brought over this English jewelry, don't know what it is. And this guy said, can I see it? And this was my first day in the land of the free. So I open my suitcase, I roll out this jewelry, and the guy then offers me, I don't know, something like $1,500. I did a quick calculation in my head and thought, that is about 7 times what I paid for it. So I sold the whole lot on my first day. And then I had to get in touch with my mother and said, Mum, you know that stuff we bought on Bermondsey Market? Do you think you can get me some more? And so I then went into business, in effect, with my mother. I had a market stall at Marina Del Rey 1 day a week. Marina is the posh area of LA. I'd put out my jewelry. And my big break was someone from one of the entertainment banks in Century City bought this Victorian brooch. And the president of the bank said, where do you get that brooch? And they said, there's this young English guy down at the Marina, and he sells English antique jewelry. So they then got me into this bank 1 day a month. I sold more in an hour 1 day a month than the market stall. So I ended up being a jewelry dealer. I then had more time, so I did a course in radio production and radio presenting at Santa Monica College. I then got a job in radio in the afternoon. So I was doing all of these things. So I worked at K-Earth 101, classic, rock and roll, news with Edmund King. So I actually did all the news. I did editing of the news. I did interviewing of people. And I worked in the afternoons for this station, which is still going strong today. It's one of the top 5 stations. So I was doing my jewelry. I was doing this. And then I met some people who ran a kind of rent-a-wreck car company called Marathon Rent-A-Car. And it was a tiny little company in Culver City. When I joined, they had 13 cars. They were all cracked cars. They were old cars. They broke down all the time. And I started to run the front of house of Marathon in Culver City. I had no experience of car rental whatsoever. But I did know about treating people well, and that's what I did. And I treated people well, and it worked. People loved Marathon. We would have lists of people waiting for our rubbish cars when they could have gone down the road to Dollar or someone else and got a brand new car for $2 a day more. But they came to Marathon because they liked us, because we talked to them, we made fresh coffee, we picked them up, and it taught me lots of lessons. And I then developed Marathon. The boss, Chuck, would go, Ed, what do we do? We're out of cars. What do we do? And I said, Chuck, we buy some more cars. And we'd go to a big Hertz lot near the airport where they'd have thousands of cars, and we'd cherry pick 30 Nissan Sentras, and Chuck would steal cigarette lighters out of the other Nissan Sentras or switch the tyres to put them on the 30 that we would buy. And I'm going, Chuck, we can get a tyre for $10. What are you doing? And he'd be jacking the car up. And we'd buy these 30 Nissan Sentras, and then we'd rent them out. And Chuck would go, Ed, what do we do? We're out of cars. Chuck, we'd buy more cars. And it was quite incredible. We expanded Marathon Rent-A-Car. We opened one in San Diego. We opened a small one in San Francisco. And I was kind of running this stuff. And then every so often I wanted to go off and travel the world. And I go to Chuck, look, I need to go to Mexico. I need to go to Thailand. And Chuck would then say, if you promise to come back, I will pay you a bonus. So I was paid to travel around the world as long as I came back to Marathon Rent-A-Car. So again, it's stuff that I probably would not have done if I'd been in the UK, but being in America, it was almost like anything goes, and it did. And yeah, I had a ball and learned a lot and absolutely loved it.
Fantastic.
You talked about learning a lot, Edmund, and I wonder, it sounds as though you've led a life which is blessed and that you've had great people, great opportunities, and you've seized them. You've worked hard. Has there been a time in your life when things haven't quite gone according to plan and you've had to dig really deep to see who the real Edmund King is?
Yeah, there have been a couple of times, particularly with the media, actually. Now, I've never been one of these people that are paranoid at the media. This kind of view that you sometimes get, the media's always out to get you, you've got to be really careful. I've dealt with the media, I don't know, for the last 30 years, probably every day of my life, and many of my friends are journalists. But there have been a couple of occasions where I have been well and truly stitched up. One was it's probably about 10 years ago or something, the Sun newspaper. And what it was and what they thought their story was that within the AA, we have a company called Drive Tech. It's a really good driver training. You guys know them. They support EV Cafe, whatever. Really good driver training division, and also does speed awareness courses. And it was one of the first companies actually to develop these speed awareness courses that are really popular. And what this journalist at The Sun had done, he'd got hold of some old accounts from Drive Tech that listed some of the directors. And because I was involved in actually bringing Drive Tech on board at the AA, I'm listed as one of the directors. And then there was some remuneration figure alongside it from people at the AA. And they put two and two together and decided that these directors were, quote, pocketing millions of pounds out of speed awareness. And because I was the only name they knew listed, it was a front page story. King has pocketed millions of pounds from speed awareness courses from cameras. AA outrage. And it's a front page story, which didn't hit me too much. But the bit I must say did hit me when I turned to page 3, not what you're thinking in the old days of The Sun, page 3. So maybe it was page 2. And then there was a picture of my house there. And I just thought, that is totally... Yeah. And, I had spoken to the journalist and categorically and honestly say, I have never, ever made one penny out of Drive Tech or speed awareness courses. I am paid by the AA for what I do. And that guy, and I'd explained that all to this guy. I'd given him copies of the accounts, but he didn't want to hear that. He wanted to run this story. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean that it was a bit hard hitting, particularly the picture of my house, because that means that, some scumbag photographer had turned up outside here when my wife and kids were here. for no reason. It was not a legitimate story. So yeah, things like that, you've got to get over it. You've got to move on. And what was interesting, a couple of years later, just out of the blue, one Christmas, I was looking for some cutting that I was quoted in, and I needed to check it. And this story up online came up again, and I just thought, this isn't good enough. This is nonsense. And this had been a couple of years later. So I then got onto the Sun. I went to them and said, you better get this down. This is, and I gave them all that spiel. I didn't think anything would come of it. And lo and behold, I was successful. So it got rid of it online. So, what's the moral of the story? 99 times the media get things right and you can work with them. You don't have to be worried. There are a few individuals who try it on, and this guy knew he was trying it on. But, I had nothing to hide. And to be honest, the article didn't really have any effect. I remember it was front page on the Saturday, and I was speaking at a big police conference. I think it was on the Monday. And despite the fact that this had been about, speed awareness courses pocketing millions, not one person at this police conference a day later mentioned it. So it was already chip paper, it was gone. So you have to get over those things.
When I asked the question about you digging deep, I imagined you'd have to talk about Norwich City.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, you're a lifelong fan, aren't you? And as a Southampton supporter, I feel your pain. It's not all roses round the door, is it? It's tough life.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's ups and downs, and people call Norwich the yo-yo club, and they try and degenerate it for that. I think it's a good time. It's really exciting. When it was formative years. I was about 7 or 8 years old at St John's Primary School in Norwich, and 2 kids in my class said, do you want to come and see my dad play football? I kind of thought this is a bit of an odd thing to say. Do I want to see your dad play football? And it turned out that one of the kids' dad was the legendary Norwich goalkeeper, Kevin Keelan. And the other one was a legendary Norwich striker at the time. His dad was Terry Alcock. Now, these are legends of Norwich City, and their sons were in my class. So I started going to Carrow Road, when I was very young. Then I got my dad to come with me, and my dad got involved. And, I've stayed with them ever since. And one of my greatest achievements is turning my 2 sons, Finbar and Lucas, who are very keen footballers and good footballers. When they were first like 8 or 9, I think Lucas said he wanted to support Man United. I said, Lucas, you've never been to Manchester. Finbar wanted to support Chelsea. Now, he was born in London. That was okay. But then I brainwashed them. And over that season a few years ago, when Norwich won promotion, straight away they changed. Those shirts went out the door, and they have been fervent Norwich fans evermore. And it gives me, I've got to say, it gives me so much pleasure. Last Monday, was it? Where, we went to Norwich Rotherham with Finbar and Lucas. And despite the fact it was a boring 0-0 draw, to spend that time with my sons, being at the match, I love it. I just love it. So yeah, there are ups and downs, there are peaks and troughs, but just that association with your team and with your family it's great. It's great.
Yeah, it is. Edmund, everything that we've talked about from almost right from the very first conversation leads us to the conclusion that you really are making a difference on the environment that you are in. Even getting your sons to believe in Norwich City and to kind of support them. What is it that drives you to make that difference? You're leaving a legacy, you're making a mark. What is it why do you want to do that? What is it that you want to achieve?
I don't know. I think I always try and make a difference. And, why do I do that? When I look back, I've kind of always done that. And I do think it does go back to childhood, and I do think it is that thing of being one of 9 kids. You've got to do something a bit different to the others to get noticed and all of that. But I do also get passionate about things, and I think John knows this. I've spoken to John about this before. Whether what are my favourite campaigns? One was Cowboy Clampers, and I'm so proud that I helped to get Cowboy Clampers outlawed on our roads. And I've spoken to John about this before. And what really pushed it for me was almost every Friday night, for some reason, I'd get a call from a pensioner or someone who'd been outside a library to return her books to pay 15p fine on a book that was one day out of date, and parked on this little scrap of land opposite the library. And these cowboys had come along, clamped her, demanded £300 to get them off. And I was just so incensed that they could do this. And, we built up this catalogue of cases. I remember being on GMTV or something with a lady from Doncaster whose 3-year-old daughter was held hostage by the cowboy clampers, outrageous. Others clamping a hearse, And to be honest, I got quite angry about what was going on here and the injustice to these people. It was not fair. That they could charge what they like. You were literally held hostage. And I guess part of me, which I got from my dad, is this: you've got to do what's right. You can't let things pass. And so I didn't, and that campaign, it did take more than 10 years. And I must say there was one MP, Rosie Winterton, Labour MP, who kind of worked with me early on, and then she got promoted. Labour came into power. She became a minister. She still remembered the clampers. And I was so delighted last week. Just by chance, I was in the House of Commons, and I bumped into, I think she's Baroness Winterton now, in the Commons, and we just had that chat. And it's like I was saying before, there are some people in your life that will support you, will help you, and I thought Rosie Winterton was fantastic. So that's a long answer, but I think when I look at these campaigns, the campaigns I get involved with, they're things I honestly care about. So if you look at our Caitlin's campaign, Caitlin's message, young drivers on rural roads, one of the hardest calls I had to make was phoning Caitlin's mother, Sharon, to basically say, look, we've done this research, we've looked at rural roads, I've read about the crash that Caitlin died in, but we actually think that message, because Caitlin was an ordinary, talented 18-year-old girl. She did not do anything wrong. It was just an inexperienced driver. There was no drink or drugs or speeding. It was inexperienced. But making that call to Caitlin's mother was really, really tough for me, because I cannot imagine if my daughter, Eloise, was killed in a crash like that. I can't imagine how I'd feel. But because I felt so passionate about trying to save other lives and thought this campaign could make a difference, that helped me to make that call. And, I still work now really closely with Sharon. There's a big event coming up next month, a young drivers event that Sharon and I are taking part of. And we're in touch all the time. So, I guess what drives me is trying to make a difference and not giving up. So, things like smart motorways, people say, oh, you've been really stubborn about that. You've been going on about that for more than a decade. Well, yeah, I have, for good reason, because I don't want people to be broke down in a live lane just dependent on technology. I want people to have more of a chance, and I will continue campaigning until that gets changed. So, I like to think I can make a difference. That's what helps me when I wake up in the morning, and I don't always know what's happening. This morning I didn't know Ford were going to announce that one of their cars, you can take your hands off the wheel and self-driving, and I've had the media on this morning about that. I've had the media on about potholes. I've had the media on about smart motorways. But I didn't know all of that was going to happen this morning.
Mm.
But that's part of the fun. That's part of the joy. It's trying to make a difference in those areas, and I love doing it.
Do you know what I love, Edmund, is that John referred to it earlier, and he said it sounds like you've had a charmed life, and actually there really isn't much of a but. I know there's been challenges in life, but I think what's really comforting to know is that people that have, inverted commas, a normal life, and John will kind of know what I mean by this, a relatively normal life. You've got good parents, you've got brothers and sisters that you still talk to.
Yeah.
You've had a good series of jobs, you've got a degree in politics, you've got good friends around you, you've got great colleagues, you've had, and you're making the best use of that in a way that is passionate, that is effective, and that is making a difference and leaving an amazing legacy.
But sometimes,
tell me what.
Sometimes, Paul, that I do just feel so very lucky, honestly, and because I've got a gorgeous, beautiful, intelligent wife, Deirdre, that I met through one of my jobs, and we've done submissions to the Wolfston Economics Prize. Deirdre is the only person who's been shortlisted twice, once with me for road miles. She did another submission on hospitals. And, I met her through one of my jobs at the British Road Federation. I went in and I met the economist, and I just thought, I'm going to marry that girl. I'm going to marry her. It was like, and I've got 3 brilliant kids who've never been a problem. And sometimes I don't feel guilty, but I kind of think I've just been so lucky with this stuff because I get on great with my kids. We have fun. We've never really had problems at work. I'm doing what I want to do. And sometimes when I look at other people's lives and what they've had to go through, Mira Naran, I've worked with very closely on smart motorways. Her son, 8-year-old Dev, was killed. Sharon and Caitlin and people like that. And I kind of look at them, and in a way, I do feel a little bit guilty, because I kind of think I think I've had it easy. I think I've had brilliant, enjoyable life doing what I want to do. But then again, other days I think, but I do work hard at it, and people sometimes think it comes easy, it comes granted. And I always say to my team, the time you become complacent is the time you won't win. So any radio interview I do, local radio, and even if it's on one of the subjects I know backwards, I don't take it for granted. I take 10 minutes before the interview to concentrate my mind. What are the 3 points I want to make, and do that. The day you take it for granted and kind of, it's easy, it's only Radio Devon or whatever, that's the day you begin to lose it. So, some people say, you can present, you can stand on stage, you can do that. Yeah, I can, because I prepare for it. I don't just turn up, and John knows this as a key presenter. The skill isn't just getting on the stage. The skill is thinking about it beforehand. It's concentrating the mind. It's what will work here, what will work there. And some people think it's easy, but it's not easy if you work at it, but it is very fulfilling.
Yeah. And that's the joy that it comes across, Edmund, as John alluded to at the beginning, the humility, the gratefulness, and gratitude is a great leveler, isn't it? Just being thankful that we have a good life. But also what you've done is demonstrate how having a good life and kind of thinking, what about all these other people? Then that drives you to be a support and a blessing to those people, and to create positive messages and leave a legacy. I mean, we've not got much time left, Evan. I'm really conscious of a deadline approaching.
I'm actually okay with that other deadline now. I've had a message that will be a bit later. So
good. So, but how would you like to be remembered? What would you like to be your epitaph? The obituary in the Times. What's that going to say? Because there will be one.
Write your own headline, Edmund. This is the chance to get back at the sun.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I guess it's that Edmund King has made a difference to drivers in the United Kingdom. You know, from making roads safer, to helping make cars cleaner. The transition to electric vehicles, again, is something I've been passionate about and talking about for 20 odd years. And, you know, campaign to change smart motorways, campaign to outlaw cowboy clampers, etc. I guess it's getting some recognition for some of those things that over the last 30 years, I've worked pretty hard on some of those things. So, yeah, it would be nice to be remembered for some of those. And, I've got to say, in 2016, when out of the blue, I got this letter from the palace saying that I was going to be made OBE for services to road safety. I mean, I was just so chuffed. I was just so honoured that came about, and that my mother and my family could go to Buckingham Palace. And slightly sad that my dad wasn't still with us to see it. And my dad was always an AA member and had the AA maps and the route planners and the AA badge on his Ford Zodiac. And gosh, he would have loved to go to the palace. Yeah. But yeah. So it's things like that. If I can be seen as making a bit of a difference in the automotive world and making it safer, greener and cleaner, then I'd be happy with that.
I think that's a given. John?
Yeah, just some final thoughts really, Edmund. I hope that in 20 years' time, when Paul is ancient and I am
and
ancient,
I'm even more ancient,
and we reflect and we reflect on life, that when asked the question, who has been a big influence in your life, that I quote Edmund King, actually, and the time that I was weird and you were the first person I was weird with, because discovering you through my work and seeing the things that you believe in and how you deliver them and the humility with which you operate at all times is a lesson to everybody. So you are a massive influence in my life, and I can't thank you enough. The EV Cafe wouldn't be the EV Cafe without you. Right. That is for certain. Yeah. Thank you for all you do. And the roads wouldn't be as safe as they are. You have doubtless saved countless lives with your life, and you are rightly proud of that.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Paul, for being so supportive for the stuff we do, and also for you guys getting that this is serious stuff. We might play around on the EV Cafe, but you guys know that what we're doing is going to change the world. It is going to make it, that sounds hyperbole, but it is going to make it a better place. So the role you guys bringing the message to the people, to companies out there, is absolutely essential. So power to your elbows. Why did I say that?
Indeed.
Not a great soundbite, was it really? Surely EV King could do better than that.
We'll let you think about that for a second, because with the headline, Edmund King gives power to the elbows of the EV Cafe.
Yeah, no.
Not sure it's going to be good. But do you know what, Edmund? I don't know you as well as John, but what I do know is that the summary that John just gave was absolutely spot on. And as a representative of the AA can only be very, very fortunate that they have somebody like you as a president that Because president and humility and president and making a difference and president and leaving a legacy don't often go together, and we've only got to think of the presidents around the world today that aren't doing such a great job. And you have taken it to a new level and set the bar incredibly high, but have been a friend to the EV Cafe, and we thank you for that. We thank you for your humour and the lightness with which you deliver everything, and it helps. It fits with us because that's what we want to do, make it accessible. It's been a real privilege. I honestly feel totally privileged to have spent some time with you today, and we've got a wonderful conversation to share with everybody. It's incredible. So
those listening to the podcast may not see this, but my cheeks actually hurt because I've smiled so much through this chat. I really have.
But you've got to smile, don't you, John? You've got to smile. Going through life, you will have ups and downs, but there's good at the end of it. There's good every day. You can do a good thing every day. You can do a good deed. So, no, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to speaking to you both again soon. And thank you so much for indulging me and listening to me today.
Been an absolute pleasure, as always. Edmund King, the president of the AA, what a joy to have shared this hour with you. And we look forward to, possible announcements in the near future. We hope for real progress in all of your campaigns, the things that you stand for across a number of different projects. And so we look forward to that. And if you want to kind of check out the AA, head over to their website, theaa.com, and check out the support that the AA provide on so many levels, not least power to electric drivers, but breakdown, supporting many different aspects of our motoring life. And been a wonderful supporter of the EV Cafe, and we really are very grateful for the support that the AA have always given to us and yourself. And if there's more that can be gained from checking out the EV Cafe page and the other podcasts that are there, and also our website, LinkedIn and the website, do please follow us and do please check us out. But for now, thanks for listening and have a great day, everybody.